A good afternoon and welcome to all our viewers. This afternoon, welcome to Elephant Pan in Botswana, in and amongst the beautiful Mopani woodland with an elephant just scouring along the edges, looking for stuff that's washed down into the pan. My name is Japie Potgieter and I'm going to be your host this afternoon. I'm very, very excited to see what happens this afternoon. Just have a look. This elephant. Now, it's interesting. I am not sure, but it might be the same elephant that we saw here yesterday. You can see he's just carefully checking out all the areas. Looks like there's a few new dead branches added there, just to deter the elephant from moving this way, I'm sure. But he's still very interested to see what's happening in that corner, as they are curious and intelligent. But it looks quite comforting. What a beautiful view. This beautiful pan gives the most amazing reflections of the sky. You can see the overcast or the cloudy sky and then the blue patches. Now, I would like to remind our viewers that this is a live and interactive show this afternoon, and of course you can join in on the conversation. You can either join from your app or you can join us on either X, and you can send your questions to wildearth.tv/questions, or you can scan that QR code there on the bottom right of the screen. And then of course you can send through whatever you like. There we go. You can join the conversation on X, #WildEarth, and you can send through comments or questions if you want to talk about something specific. If you just want to say hi, anything is welcome. And here we go. Penelope Kenyon, you're saying hello to everybody at Wild Earth and to the Zoomies and to the watchers, and you're saying you're looking forward to amazing sightings this afternoon. I'm sure we will have, so thank you for that. And then Felicity Rabe, you're saying hi, it's Misty from Australia. Oh, so apologies, it's Misty. And you're saying thank you for the footage and you feel right at home again with a heart. I am so happy to hear that you're feeling home in Africa. That's very, very good to hear. Indeed, quite an amazing feel to have. Africa is a very, very special place. I'm sure for a lot of people that's had the privilege of traveling here, and for those living here, of course, would know the feeling. Have a look how casually this elephant's strolling through. Now, as he's moving through, you can see he's kicking up quite a bit of the muddy bottom of the pan, and he's also feeling and looking for food and rarities, seeds, fruits that might have washed down. Generally, these pans or watering holes are usually at the bottom of a depression, and that's why they gather the water. Often the soils amongst the Mopani trees are quite clayey, so they tend to hold water quite well, make excellent pans. Then Penelope Kenyon, you're saying that the pan's looking fuller today. It is, I'm not sure. From my side, I'm not 100% sure. It might be. Maybe it rained there, I'm not too sure, but it looks amazing. It's very, very large. You can see it extends well beyond where the elephant is. And then of course the larger part of the pan and an open space off to the left. Now what you find with elephant bulls like this one, it looked like a younger bull from what I could see. Very, very likely haven't been to this part for a little while, or maybe, and with that I mean might have been here for the last couple of days. It's a good area with lots of resources, so it's a good space to spend a bit of time, and often you find that they might spend quite a few days around here, especially if it's cool, it's got water, it's got food. But yeah, so not sure, Penelope, but it does look full, that's for sure. Then Mercedes Bean, you're saying greetings to the Wild Earth crew and chatters on a happy Saturday. And then Joan Mello also saying good Catterday to Wild Earth and to me. Thank you, Joan. And Wendy's also saying hello to all our viewers from PE. So, what a beautiful start here at Elephant Pan. But I think we're going to head over to Old Donyo and see what's happening there this afternoon. Spectacular. That is amazing. What a beautiful, beautiful elephant. Indeed, quite a special animal to see. An animal with tusks like this. Often something that if you do ever have the privilege of seeing one in the wild, up close and personal, it is a once in a lifetime sighting. And that is spectacular. Very rarely that these large tusks are symmetrical, or somewhat. It usually happens that way, that one curves up a little bit. But this is unbelievable. What a beautiful elephant. I would like to see him turn back, facing us again. It looks like a rather mature bull, maybe a rather old bull. Just have a look at that. Amazing. You can see there's some chips on the tips of the tusks. So they're definitely getting used, even though they're that large. And does have a very calm demeanor. And if I'm not mistaken, I can see there's some temporal gland secretions. It looks like he might... I will have to check the back legs as well, but there's a chance that this bull might be in must. The bulls this age, even when they're in must, they are rather relaxed. The temporal gland secretion, of course, could be from a lot of different, or could be happening because of a lot of different reasons. We'll just have a look at him. Must be carrying quite heavily on those tusks. Have a look at that. I always find it funny when they slurp up some water like that and then they start squirting it out halfway up to the mouth. And I wonder why. It might be just getting rid of some whatever was at the top of the water surface or whatever they might have picked up. Maybe also the action, it cools it down a little bit. As I can imagine, even though this water is pumped, it's quite hot out here, so very likely a small pan like this gets baked quite well by the sun and therefore very, very hot. Mercedes Bean, you saying this is 1 ton? Aha! I was wondering. Now I have unfortunately not seen 1 ton that often. I have had the chance and the privilege of seeing 1 ton before, but I'm very happy to know from our more regular viewers. Thanks, Mercedes. 1 ton is indeed notorious in this area from what I've heard. I mean, it's hard to mistake with those tusks. But I do know in and around this area there are quite a few elephants that's carrying the gene with exceptional tusks. And from what I've heard, he's quite the troublemaker at points. He looks rather relaxed today. Might be why there's nothing else around the watering hole now. Well, he's found some mud. Probably from where other elephants were drinking. I can see there's quite a bit of water that's been splashed out there. And then Penelope Kenyon, you're saying that all the lovely ladies are on board the chat today. Very, very happy to hear that. And I really, really hope that it will continue to be as great as it is. What a good way to start. Beautiful view of Elephant Pan and then onto an amazing elephant. 1 ton. Interesting name. But an elephant this size must be quite large. Very likely upwards of 5 tons or more. And then Sandy Franklin is also saying good morning to Yapi and to Mika. I'm very happy to hear that you also greeting Mika. And welcome, Sandy. Good to have you on board as well. So Picasso is asking what happens if a large tusker loses 1 tusk, and do the muscles on that side atrophy? That is a very good question, Picasso. I'm not sure about whether the muscles atrophy or not. I think there might be, it depends on how deep the damage runs and what the extent of the loss is. Like often what we find is if these tusks break off, then if they just break off halfway or so, then the elephant should be fine. I mean, it's a sad loss to have such a magnificent creature lost, something that takes such a long time to grow, but it wouldn't really affect the animal in terms of its physical condition necessarily. It might make life a little bit more difficult, but the animal will adapt quite quickly. But often with elephants with very large tusks, they tend to break off and often like right up into the socket, and that potentially could cause some serious issues with infection and abscesses forming in the long run, and that could affect the animal's health. And then we've got a comment from Captain saying, wow, magnificent. Indeed, Captain. It is definitely a magnificent creature, this. Even from the odd end, we can see how amazing it is. It's an interesting view. He's just casually moving all around this pan. You can see he's playing a bit with the water there, stirring it. Spaz, you asking, or you saying you hope you didn't miss much, and that it's great to begin here at Old Donyo. You haven't missed much. We were briefly at Elephant Pan in Botswana, and we had quite a beautiful elephant bull in there, casually moving around. It looks like there's a relaxed atmosphere amongst the elephants we've seen this far. But yeah, I suppose you haven't missed too much. And then greetings to you too, Jive Bunny. Welcome aboard, and I hope you haven't missed out too much. And then we've got another question from Captain asking me how old 1 ton is. Now, I'm not sure, Captain, but generally speaking, although genetics does play a big part in it, these elephants tend to have a growth spurt of their tusks, and it usually grows to become quite large after their prime, which is usually around 43-45 years of age. Excuse me. But it is amazing to watch that this very, very large animal is so gently playing with the water. Now I can see the muscles moving in the trunk, so there's definitely some activity, and he's slurping up quite a bit of water, it seems like. Let's just have a look. Okay, now it looks like he's squirting some water into his mouth. Can't help but wonder exactly what he's doing. I can't see him clearly from the back. But have a look at that spine. You can see that spine, that backside tells a story in itself. It's quite a thick, very, very well developed spine. You can see an extra bulge about halfway up from the top of the tail. Maybe an injury that he sustained at some point. But also, as these elephants do grow older, the weight of the animal does start to weigh in, so the spine is usually the first thing that starts to show it. And we can usually tell from a very, very prominently arched back whether it's a older animal or not. So Captain, I hope that answers your question. I think I would guess this animal is closer to 50. I'm not sure exactly of the age, and I think it would be difficult to say unless it's known, or unless aged by an expert. But just look at that. You can see that wrinkly skin to increase its body size, or its surface area. A very, very large animal often have is a little bit easier to manage their body temperature through the use of the environment. For an elephant, especially with water, and those wrinkles in the skin trap and channel the water, and that also aids with the breeze. It might be going, I can see looks like there's a decent breeze going at Old Donyo this afternoon, so will definitely aid in cooling. Victoria Pont, you're saying hello and good afternoon to everybody. Same to you, all the way from Australia, so hello to you down there in Australia. I hope you're having a wonderful afternoon that side. And then Sanjif Roy is saying that 1 ton represents the successful conservation policy of the Kenyan Wildlife Services. Kenyan Wildlife Services is aptly supported by many NGOs, and that is true, Sanjif. That is indeed very true, and it is a shining example of successful conservation indeed, especially in Eastern Africa, where ivory is still very much traded illegally, and of course it's got a high worth, and lots of regional factors, socio-economical factors that play in on the value and the sought afterness of ivory, and therefore unfortunately one of the realities is ivory poaching. And the Kenyan Wildlife Services have worked very hard over the last while, and with a lot of support from NGOs all over, have managed to get a better grip on the situation. And there's areas that's shining examples of those partnerships and how important they are, and one of them is Old Donyo, and therefore we have the chance and the opportunity to see beautiful elephants like this. Penelope Kenyon, you saying he's over 25 years old. I agree with you. I think he is definitely over 25 years old. Generally speaking, an elephant bull usually only goes into prime at around 35 years, 30 to 35 years. Usually by 25 years, from about 20 to 25 years, some elephants go into their first mast cycle, which is just an increase in the hormone testosterone and has huge other hormonal effects. And as an outsider or an observer, we know elephants in must, especially young elephant bulls in must, to be a little bit unpredictable and rowdy, so to say. But they do get affected by other large elephants in the area. Large elephant bulls usually keep the hierarchy intact, and then they affect the younger bulls by suppressing their must cycles for a while after the first few, and then that goes, and usually once they reach a more advanced age and at more of a full size, which is around 30 to 35 mainly, that's when the elephants start going into regular mast cycles again. So 25 years, he's definitely older than that, I'd say. and I think he's a little bit, or much older than that actually. And yeah, I think he's probably towards the end of his prime, if he's not just past it. But yeah, around 45 to 50 years of age. An elephant out in the wild could potentially live to more than 50, 55 to 60. Even though that is not common, like around 50 to 55 is generally quite old. But yeah, having a look at this elephant now, I'd say probably around 45 roughly there. And I think with elephants it can be tricky, especially the older bulls and the younger bulls. There's like a little bit of a 5-year play either side often. Just telling from other signs here, the very deep indents at the temporals. I'd say he is rather mature. He's been spending quite a bit of time here, and now I can see that this elephant's tusks is quite dirty, although the straighter one seems to be a little bit more dirty than the other one off to the right. Yeah, maybe he's got a bit of a wash. I think it looks like it's gradually rubbed off, so very likely, due to his current state, a bit of a stress release or a bit of a tension release, so he probably rests his trunk on that tusk quite a bit. Then we've got another comment from Captain. Captain saying he's well looked after. I agree, Captain, he is indeed well looked after. An elephant like this would be monitored very carefully by wildlife protection services, by tour guides in the area and safari guides. And they'll always keep an eye on him to see how he's doing. He does look in quite a good condition, I'm not gonna lie. I agree. I think he looks very, very good. I think there's a lot of food around for him. And yes, indeed, well done to those people that prioritize these animals' safety. And it definitely takes a lot of dedication. It is not an easy job. Lots of hardships, lots of challenges, social, financial, and of course then the unpredictability of the environment. That pertains to wildlife protection and conservation. So indeed an incredibly important aspect, very much essential to giving us the opportunity to see amazing creatures like this. Once upon a time, an elephant with tusks like this was probably seen rather often in certain areas. And as time changed and human numbers increased, of course, we saw quite a bit of a decline in some of the wildlife. So we lived in an altered world, but still very much alive with magnificent specimens like these creatures. Morsis Mihi is asking if it's 30 years before they mate. Well, Morsis, I do know that from the studies conducted, generally speaking, almost in some cases more than 70% of calves sired within an area. I know especially this is true to some of the areas in South Africa, where the calves sired are sired by elephant bulls that's regarded as mature bulls, so between the age of 35 to 45, and elephants that run regular must cycles. So having said that, it's also very difficult to gauge that accurately. I guess there's also circumstances where things might change depending on the density of other large elephants within an area and the population dynamics, which would be dependent on a lot of different factors in the environment. And then Gina Biddle. And you asking if this guy's considered one of the big tuskers that's left. Gina, I think you are very, very right. I think this might be one of the, well, it is one of the big tuskers, considered to still be alive. It's a good question. I'm not sure how many currently. Generally speaking, a big tusker is an elephant that is regarded as an animal that's carrying more than 60 pounds either side. And then you get super tuskers, which is 100 pounds either side, as far as I understand. But this is a spectacular animal, so I'm pretty sure this is definitely one of those big tuskers. Azure Jewel, you're saying he is monstrous. He is definitely monstrous. Like, this is a very, very big elephant. And interesting, what I've noticed actually with a lot of the bigger tuskers that I've seen in my own travels and experience is that they're often not that tall compared to some of the other bulls around. Like, I have seen a few that's regarded as quite massive elephants with massive tusks, but then you also get those that tend to be slightly shorter. Shorter but often sturdier. You can see, there we go, he's resting his trunk on that right hand side tusk. I was talking about it just now, thought it looked like maybe that's what's happening to the darker color on that one, the mud. It's probably been rubbed off by the trunk, and often a good way just to relax a little bit and get the trunk to rest the muscles. But also when elephant bulls are in mast, you see them do this as well. But a big elephant, obviously got a big thirst and a big water requirement. You can see some of the other creatures waiting their turn. You can see the giraffes are starting to feed now in the background. They know it might take a while. And maybe they also know that he is not the most sharing when it comes to around a watering hole like this. And then Picasso, you are wondering rather, when the elephants eat all the food that they need. I mean, it is a very large animal, and in some cases a big bull elephant like this can eat as much as 250 to 300 kilograms of wet material a day, which is a massive amount of food. And that means they have to be active. They have to eat, they have to eat constantly, and they often spend a lot of time during nighttime eating. But it depends on the animal schedule. Sometimes with older elephants, they don't tend to eat as much anymore, and generally the older they get, you can see that their diet tends to suffer a bit and they eat less and less, and then they might spend a lot more time around the water, because of course drinking water is something that they can do, and that's essential for their survival. Also it helps with digestion. But yeah, 250 or more than 200 kilograms of wet material a day, that's a massive amount. A lot of that also comes out the other end, so that's another reason why they need to keep eating. Such a large animal only eating plant material and existing on the nutrients gained from that. Protein and calcium and phosphorus to be able to have such large tusks. They do need to eat a lot, and they spend a lot of time. Some case studies suggest as much as 20 hours a day feeding, sometimes more. But I think these are quite relative, and it also depends on the intakes. Summertime, with the availability of grass, you'll find that they eat a lot of grass. They'll spend a lot of time in the open spaces, but generally during the middle of the day when it's extremely hot, these animals tend to relax a little bit, and they might, in some cases, spend it around watering holes or at night time. Depends on what it did during the day. Maybe it might have been moving in from another area. But this has been an exceptional view of this spectacular, beautiful elephant. And talking about elephants, as the name suggests, let's head over to Tembe Elephant Park to see if we might see some elephants there. And no elephants yet that I can see, but Nyala. Quite a few in Nyala. Also another beautiful creature. And how beautiful is it here at Tembe Elephant Park this afternoon. We can see it's been busy, even though there's no elephants around. I can see the elephants were here indeed. You can see the wet patches, the soil that's been moved. This area of South Africa has had some good good rains and therefore quite green, quite productive. You can see some impala as well. One standing in the shade of that big tree on the water's edge. Those trees provide extremely popular spots in the shade there. There we go. The two usual Egyptian geese. And there we go. There's an impala chewing the cud. Oh, there's a yellow-billed stork hiding next to the lala palm there as well. Now, what's quite interesting with this female impala, she funnily enough, still looks pregnant almost. Maybe it's just the angle she's standing at, and she's just had a good feed and a good drink of water, and that's why she's chewing the cud there in the shade. Now, I've just heard that the zoomies have told me that apparently they have heard something alarming around here. And even though I haven't, this is quite good to know. Quite an exciting development. I do know sometimes these animals would rather prefer the open spaces than in the thicker bush if there is a potential of a predator around. But of course, predators also know very, very well that these spaces are the areas that attract the animals, like this impala. And then Sandy Franklin is asking if I've ever seen an elephant whose tusks were so long that it was dragging on the ground. That's a good question, Sandy. Like, I don't recall that long. I've seen elephants with tusks almost on the ground, but generally they also would try not to drag them, purely from the point that they don't want to damage them, and also it would make things quite tricky for them. So I've noticed with, I know in and around the Kruger Park area and the associated game reserves around it, there is one well-known elephant that is studied, that occasionally when he goes through his mast cycle, he'll travel areas outside of the areas that he usually goes to, and that means that he moves quite a bit. So whenever we do see him, he's easily identifiable because he's got like rather straight tusks, and that means that he walks with his head quite up high, not to let it drag on the ground and get damaged. What do we have there? On the wooden deck, resting out. Can't see too clearly. Possibly a little lizard. There we go. It is indeed. Looks like a skink of some sorts. Now, we're seeing the zoomies checking very, very carefully in and amongst the thick bush there. This is also an area that would be an exceptional hiding spot for the leopard. Even the lion. The lion in this region have adapted quite well to the thick bush and hunting in the thick bush. And then Morsis Mihi, you're saying it's such a beautiful place. And you almost forgot what green looked like. You've been buried in the snow for months now. I'm very sorry to hear that. You know, Moses, I have never had the chance to have a white Christmas, and it is something that I would love to one day experience. But I can imagine, not that I have any experience in that, but I can imagine that it must become a little bit, what's the word? A little bit boring if you don't see beautifully green grasslands for a while. So I'm very happy that you're enjoying seeing it. Even myself, I'm enjoying it thoroughly. I think it's such a beautiful hue of green here at Tembe, and these sand forests create these matte green grass lawns, which is so beautiful. Lady Macbeth, you also commenting on the water. You're saying there's a lot more water than there used to be. There is indeed. All those elephant holes dug is all filled up. And then Sandy, you also asking a very interesting question. What is the smallest antelope when it's a baby and adult? Sure. I don't know exactly what the smallest one is. There is a few contenders as far as I know. I know one of them that you sometimes find in these sand forests is the Sunni, which is a very, very tiny little antelope. And I've had the privilege once to see them. Not too far, a little bit further south in the sand forest, a little bit further south of Tembe. But I do know that there's one antelope that some might regard as some of the smallest, if not the smallest, known as the royal antelope. And he was, it was described by the Swedish zoologist Carl Linnaeus somewhere in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Now, that must be a very, very, very small antelope. I'm not sure exactly about the size. But it must literally be probably the size of a rabbit, or just larger. What's interesting is I've seen some duiker, which is also another little antelope, the grey or common duiker in South Africa. That can be quite common to see. There we go. What's that? A grey heron, intently focused on the water. I saw a bit of movement there on the water surface, so maybe something in there. But so the little duiker, a baby duiker, is also very, very small, and they often hide them up in thick bush when they're tiny. Sometimes I have even mistaken them for hares when they get a fright and they suddenly run off, and then you realize, well, that's a bit of a strange looking hare. So tiny, tiny, tiny. But yeah, the royal antelope, I believe, is the smallest one. I'm not sure what that antelope would be like when it's born. It must be extremely tiny. But yeah, the Sunni, like I said, another specialty of eastern South Africa, very, very, very small creature perfectly hiding away in the thick sand forests. These sand forests play a very, very important role in the ecosystems that's still preserved in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal province. Besides being unique and biodiversity hotspots, they certainly provide a lot of good cover for the smaller, rarer creatures. They have an interesting, or they host to an interesting variety of spiders and arachnids, insects. They generally cool the hot area down through their cover, but there is a lot of diversity in terms of its plant life. Plants it's quite unique and only found there. Reptiles, depending on the type of sand forest and the type of soils in the specific region, it can also affect the variety of the plant life. And then another interesting species of plants that it's quite diverse in is orchids or epiphytes. But got very excited there, hoping for something a little bit more dramatic, or a predator, potentially here Tembi, but haven't seen anything. So I think let's go check in at Nkoro for the first time this afternoon. And here we've got warthogs. Warthogs near a mud wallow. And just have a look, I can see, oh, there we go, little one in the mud, rolling. These warthogs around Nkoro is quite the sight. Yo, some vigorous, very, very exciting moments there with getting covered in mud. But now I can see there is some indents there, and these pools that randomly form like this often start from muddy or marshy sections where the soil is so soft, and then when the large animals like the elephant or the rhinoceros move through, they create these muddy patches. Quite a few warthogs here. You can see all the water dammed up. Very, very wet area in the low veld, especially the central low veld, central and southern, but I know it's been receiving good rain all over, and even though these muddy patches and closed roads and the floods can be devastating, we do not want to complain about the water. Jive Bunny, you're saying a cute little warthog piggy wiggy. Indeed it is. There's a cute little warthog piggy wiggy. And it looks like he's enticed all the other older warthog piggy wiggies to do the same. And there we see there's a break in the cloud there, but that's quite interesting because the moment like the cloud breaks, we get this extremely almost unbearable moments of heat coming through. Just a reminder of how extremely hot this area gets. And of course, as time goes along with climate change, this area is increasingly seeing hotter and hotter temperatures during this period of the year, and our rain has been not too much over the last few years, and it's definitely drying out, generally speaking, as a rule. So it will be interesting though. This is the first very good rains in a while, even though it was late. So it will be interesting to see how it will develop over the next, say, 4, 5 or 6 years. Penelope Kenyon, you saying hello my lovely warties. Indeed, just look at them. Getting all their spa treatments in there. Look at that one. That is quite the pose there. I think there should be a point where these warthogs might be regarded as having too much fun there. But have a look, they're carefully trying to cover their whole body with the mud. So now, other thing is also something to look out for here, even though I haven't spotted them. I heard from one of the zoomies that there's some blacksmith lapwing chicks here. Now I saw the adult as we got to the warthogs. So I know with the wind moving through the taller grass, it's tricky to say for sure if it's a lapwing chick, as they are so small and they hide so well, they blend in so much, they can sit perfectly still without getting seen. And then of course there's also quite a bit of locusts and grasshoppers hopping around in the hot humid grass poles, so it will be tricky to see, but good to know. There we go, there's the adult lapwing, 2 of them, one next to the road and the other one, there we go, there is, oh no, it's only a grass strand moving in the wind. I thought, oh, there we go, there is the little chicks. Yes, indeed. Well, I can see one right on the road's edge to the right of the screen, or the now just to the left of that one, right on the road's edge. I saw the little one moving in the camera frame. I'm not 100% sure where it is now. There we go. It stepped back out into the road, and just look how small that little thing is. It's literally the size of the adult's head. That is incredible. Very, very, very small little chicks. Interesting to see that it's on the open road. Now, one adult on the road, other one off the road in the taller grass. When the chicks are this small in the tall grass, they can be tricky, they can be easily lost, and obviously something can happen quite easily, so maybe that's why one adult at least near the open patches, always near water. There's a puddle there. But just have a look at that little chick, small size. Look at it. There are 2 indeed. So I thought I saw 2 moving earlier. You can see the one just moved off to the right out of frame, and there that little one's just went to go. Oh, I thought it went to go lay down or sit down. I crouched down just in front of the adult. But of course they've got very cryptic markings with the whole idea of them blending in and amongst those nondescript patches of animal dung and mud next to the water's edge, or on an open scrape, often where these birds nest. But what a special sight to see. These little guys are so interesting, and we're so fortunate that we actually get to see them grow up here. Even though it's a bird that's quite common throughout southern Africa, like all the way down in the subtropics down to South Africa's tip. They're quite vigilant parents. You can see constant calling there. And calling also intensifies as whatever potential danger is coming closer and closer. But the birds also communicate to each other the whole time, just to make themselves known where they are and if something might happen. But yeah, there's usually a few eggs laying in a small scrape on the ground. Could be up to 4, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But then there is usually only a few that make it. I've mostly seen 2. That often comes down to 1, but yeah, occasionally you have more. But yeah, what's interesting also is that these parents will take shifts in guarding the little ones. Even though they'll be close and keeping an eye from a distance, they'll move about to forage to keep themselves up. And then of course the chicks itself, one adult will always have the chicks very, very close to it until the chicks are a little bit older. Well, I heard there is a rhino with a baby at Founder, so I think we're going to head over there. Oh, and have a look at this. We got a bit of a standoff. This is quite interesting. There is another 2 rhino coming in. Have a look at that. You can feel the tension here. This is a very interesting situation. 2 younger rhinos and then this massive bull rhino in the mud. You can see he looks like he's been in the mud for a while. Amazing to see these encounters. You could feel the tension there as the camera framed up these animals when we arrived here at Founders. And white rhino, being quite social animals, generally they don't mind spending time near each other, but you do find that sometimes these large bull rhinos become interested in a female while she's still got a little one, especially a little one that size. That one looks a little bit older already. Probably nearing about 2 years of age already. If I had to take a guess, I'll probably have to see when it gets up. But now it's just enjoying the mud, acting a little bit oblivious, although it's still quite conscious that there's a big rhino bull. However, Mum made sure that he stays in his place for now, and that the water can be shared. Exactly, Jive Bunny. You saying stay away from my baby. I agree. That's exactly what she was saying. She was trying to tell him to stay put, and we'll see how long it lasts. And what often happens is the little one turns around and then it becomes curious and goes and investigates, and then the big one gets up, moves forward. You can see Mom very alert. Was just about to lay down. Oh! And something gave them a spook. Just have a look at those two muddy bottoms moving off. That is quite a small baby rhino, actually. I'd say apologies. Just had a bit of a by accident put the mute on my mic. But some very exciting stuff here at Founders Lodge this afternoon. Look at that. There's a lot going on here. 6 rhinos. You can see that big bull rhino has got no issue with these guys. Wildlife Lady, you're saying it's amazing to see so many rhinos together. Yes, indeed, it is excellent. Just have a look at that. There's another big one. Oh, that's the mother. Oh, and the baby is having a drink of milk. Look how carefully and quietly the mother is standing for this little one to have its drink. It looks like it's laying down and drinking. It's quite spoiled. But indeed, very special to see so many rhinos together. It's a hot day. They must have all been moving in and around this area and decided that now is the time for everybody to come down to the water. Sandy Franklin, you saying this is the most rhinos you've seen at one time? Well, this is not common nowadays. This is a very special sight in the day and age that we live in with rhinos. Like, I do know that a few years back that wasn't, and this is how crazy this situation is. Like a few years back I remember seeing quite large crashes of white rhino, as they are known, groups of rhino, the collective noun crash. And I recall in particular one day where I recall seeing 15 of them together. Not to mention the ones that you see from a distance if you're standing up in hilly country in areas where a lot of rhino can be found. And then since then, it's been a rare sight. Only very special areas with very, very good protection. Have a look. Spectacular animals. You can see this big bull is he's taking up most of the space. He's not bothered by those two young ones. Not sure about their sex, if it's male or female. They're obviously curious, but he's not bothered by them. And you can see those horns. So the bull, we can notice that he's been dehorned a little while back. He's got quite a blunt abrupt end to the horn at the tip. That's starting to regrow. And the others, they might have been dehorned at some stage, but their horns have also developed quite well. And here we can see, if you look on that rhino's foot, you can see a foot collar with a little solar panel on the top to charge the battery. And of course, especially over the last 5 years, but 5 to 10 years, technology have come into play big time within the protection of these animals. And what we're seeing there is a tracking collar, a smart tracking collar, as some of them are referred to, and they track these animals' movements quite accurately over a low frequency area network. And what they do is, whenever there is any abnormal or abnormalities within the way these animals move, then the authorities get alerted, and that will mean to go and investigate. And it also functions for when the animal has a potential injury, or if something like malnutrition starts to take its toll. Then Jive Bunny is saying baby rhinos make such sweet hig and hiss pitched sounds, or high. I'm assuming you are saying high pitched sounds, and yes, they do. Even the large rhinos, like sometimes when you have a situation like this where these big animals are, well, a big bull approaching a female and a little one, and you hear the female, sometimes even the male, make those high pitched noises trying to ward the male off. If you look at that big rhino in the water's nostril, you can see the heavy breaths of air that comes out each time he exhales, just splashing some of the water off. And quite interesting to see those younger ones just standing there, casually checking him out. Too hot to move off. Probably wants to wallow, but showing some careful consideration for the large bull's rank, I'm sure. And what a spectacular scene. This is amazing. Quite an interesting social interaction here. Something that in today's world is increasingly rarer to see. Very, very special. And that rhino is just waiting its turn. Let's see, it might come down for a drink. Will it push its mouth into the water, or will it move off like the other one did? Here we go, it looks like there's a bit of water getting drunk there. But of course, in a case like this where you have two younger rhinos, should they be bulls, a large bull like this would be aware of them. If they're not challenging him, he would not mind their presence, especially not around the water. And also they are showing respect. But these situations can develop quite quickly and change quite quickly in some cases. And that's very, very interesting to watch what's happening here. That rhino is almost, you can see now it's gradually moving off, but it was almost begging that large rhino to come in for a bit of a drink and maybe a wallow. And there is the mother and her tiny calf that's now had his drink, and or her drink, and is resting up in the shade of the tree. Another important patch that might get contested at the later stage if the big bull leaves the water. But I've heard that we've got some rare visitors to Wangi, so let's head over there, and then we see, I heard there's some crowned cranes there. Amazing, just look at that, and not just one or two, quite a few. About 14 in all from what I can see. Oh, no, the one in the back should be that lucky. I think the one in the back is a marabou stork, although very beautiful in its own right. Not quite crowned cranes, and just have a look, they are clearly capitalizing big time here. Spectacularly beautiful birds, these. Grey-crowned cranes, not a bird that commonly seen in South Africa anymore. And they do like open grasslands or patches. Southern grey-crowned cranes in these parts. We'll get another one that sometimes overlaps a little bit in East Africa. And Mindy Tillapau. Good to hear from you again, Mindy. You saying, wow, they are gorgeous. They are indeed. Sandy Franklin's also asked a question which is related to the rhinos that we just saw. She's asking how much it would cost to donate a collar. Sandy, I am not entirely sure of the current prices. I know that with the technology at the rate that it's developing, the access to it is becoming cheaper as time goes on. And it's interesting with the collar technology is like there's been a lot of advances made in the last few years over a relatively short period of time, where it kind of had a very one-track way for a long time. So I'm not 100% sure what it would cost, but I know that it is extremely useful and vitally important for certain areas. It provides researchers and people working with extremely invaluable data on the movement of species and their ecology, which of course contributes on a practical level to their conservation directly. And I do know that there is quite a few organizations, NGOs and institutions that do help with donating for the cause of buying collars. But I'm not 100% sure what they are at currently. Jive Bunny, you also saying, oh wow indeed, hey, what a beautiful bird. Nothing better than to have a number of them together. I'm seeing now 11 of them, carefully picking up whatever they can in and amongst that wet grass. You can see there's some water there at the bottom. So Spas Yankov, you're asking why they are not seen so much anymore in South Africa. And you're saying that it's great to see them here at Wangi. Indeed it is. Have a look at that. What a beautiful bird, hey? A little bit of a display there and showing off. So they, I suppose, to get back to your question, they birds. They like open grasslands, and funnily enough, in South Africa, open grasslands with marshes and pans. And we do tend to see them in the eastern half, like the southern eastern half, the central eastern half of South Africa. The grasslands there, where there's a little bit more rain, we tend to see them more so now. They are a little bit sensitive to like built up and areas with a lot of human action, although they are often found adjacent to the agricultural regions, where there's created grasslands. But I do recall them being a little bit more numerous at one point. But they are an interesting bird to observe. And like the last few that I've seen personally, other than here now at Wangi, I've often randomly seen in marshy sections it's developed somewhere along some of our freeways in South Africa. Just have a look at that. And that is beautiful. When they bend down like that, feeding, I'm wondering what they're chasing. Probably various different things. They've got quite a varied diet from what I understand, which includes basically almost anything they can catch. Long legs and bright colors. Bird that's perfectly adapted for open areas to forage through like this from a vantage point. You can pick up whatever moves in the tall grass. Just have a look at that. Beautiful birds. So Mindy Tillapa is asking if there's not one of the crane species that is a national bird of one of the African countries. Well, Mindy, I do know that both the crowned crane and a few others are on certain African countries' emblems and coat of arms. South Africa's national bird is the blue crane, which is also a very, very beautiful bird. And then Badger Bud is actually saying that the crowned crane is the national bird of Uganda. That is very good to know. Thank you for that, Badger Bud. I was not aware of that, even though I have been in Uganda and I know that I have seen the crowned crane on one of the coat of arms before. I was trying to think now which one it was, so thanks for that. Appreciate that comment. Just have a look at that, a beautiful round pan there. I know in Wangi in some of these areas, these open sections, which essentially forms where there used to be old rivers that ran through the ancient dunes that form the base of the soils of Wangi. They do gather these pans and marshes of water in these open spaces at points, and that's what we're seeing there. And they do attract a lot of life to these open spaces. So very, very beautiful area this, and spectacular. You can see all those marabou stalks there just basking out in the sun. But yeah, indeed, very, very important to this area and sustaining this area essentially. But what a beautiful area here at Wangi. And Lady Macbeth is saying it's a new cam, or at least to her. Lady Macbeth, to me too, and I think it's spectacular. This is very, very beautiful. I think it's great. What a beautiful sight to get to see the crowned crane. But from a nice surprise this afternoon, I hear the rhinos are still at Founder, so I think we're going to head back there and see if there's any developments. And here we have the big rhino still wallowing. He shifted around a little bit, but just look at that view. Everything covered in mud. Well, not everything, halfway. There we go. Maybe he might cover himself completely. But if you're the big male in this area, no need to move if you don't have any push. So we just came from Wangi, which was a new Africamp to me as well, and I know Lady Macbeth commented on it. What a spectacular area! But Spaz Yankov also commented on it, and Spaz, you said you saw the artificial watering hole there, and you say that you know that Kerry's been there before. But after Victoria Falls. But yeah, Wangi is indeed definitely a bucket list reserve. Also one of the old, very large reserves in Africa, and in southern Africa, of course. And a very, very unique habitat. A huge area in western Zimbabwe. And well known for elephant as well as lion. And of course those open spaces of those open spaces of the grass stretches that run through the sandy woodland forests up on the crests. So indeed a bucket list, extremely beautiful, very, very productive in terms of game viewing. Just have a look at this rhino. He doesn't look like he's intending to get up anytime soon. Laying with his face, his mouth in the mud, ears moving. Look how covered his collar is in mud. I can imagine with it being covered in mud like that, of course that would not make it able to be exposed to the sun, so it will be covered a little bit. So it must have a proper backup battery running for if it can't get the sun, but of course as the animal moves that mud will break off. Just have a look at that. You can see its face, and what a face. What a character. Look at that thick skin all over. You can see the horn itself, it scratches from rubbing up and using it as a tool to move away stumps to get to juicy grasses. And you can see how it's worn down there. You can see the almost furry-like keratin fibers exposed just above the base of the horn there. A reminder that it is just keratin, same as hair and fingernails, but it's compressed keratin fiber, so it's quite a tough keratin, a little bit tougher than our fingernails, even though pretty much the same. And then look at all the flies, all those little markings on the face. Like this guy's very likely sustained a few scrapes, who knows, maybe from harassing that female and young one. What sometimes happens is these large bulls might tend to follow a female and their young for quite a while, hoping that there might be a chance. And then Spaz, you're saying it's such a beautiful view with this rhino in front and in those mountains in the back. That is very, very true. And I think you can see, if you look at the size of this rhino's eyes, you notice that it's quite small. So clearly not its strongest sense. So I don't think he's too bothered about the view at the moment, but for us it's very, very beautiful and almost unreal. Those beautiful green hills there in the background. I do not know what those mountains are, to be honest. I'm not too familiar with the surrounding area. So yeah, sorry about that, Spas, but I'll have a look into it. I'm sure I'll be able to find out. You can see it looks like the mother and the baby is still there. Oh, for a moment there I thought it's another baby. And then, oh, you can see the baby rhino just lifted his head with these three little warthogs coming in. Debbie Did It is asking what would push this big rhino out of his spot. Debbie, I'm pretty sure not much at this point. Maybe another very big rhino, or maybe that female rhino and her little one if she is determined to. But I think from her point of view she'd rather just avoid them. So potentially elephant. A big elephant might decide that the rhino is in the way and decide no. And that's what often happens, is when rhinos do tend to move down to the water to wallow in areas where there's elephants, they come and they displace the rhinos. So you'll find that rhinos can be quite nervous in certain areas, especially around watering holes. Even though white rhinoceros, technically, after the elephant, the second largest land mammal, well, at least in weight. And the largest out of the rhinoceros species. Not much that displaces them. I know occasionally predators could ensure for a little bit of a rough time. They can affect their behavior, especially younger rhinos. But generally speaking, large established bull rhinos are not. They don't fear too much. You can see the size of that hump there above the head on the neck. Massive, massive muscles to carry that heavy head and horns. And this is indeed an extremely strong animal. Mindy Tillipau is saying that those horns look like tree stumps, and Mindy, indeed they do. You can see it looks almost like frayed tree stumps that's been worn down gradually. Kind of like the stumps in the trees that rhinos shape when they go and they rub up against them to get rid of their excess mud or scratch themselves, as this guy will probably do once he leaves here. Just covering his belly, laying with his nose and face right in the mud. Quite a few warthog coming in. The grey-skinned animals. Of course, when it's very hot, like it looks like it is today here at Founders, these guys definitely come and wallow to cool themselves down. Oh, I don't see much wallowing. It mainly looks like they came for a drink of water. I can see all those flies around the markings near the horns. Now I'm assuming that might be cuts, and what we're seeing there is a little bit of dried blood, which is not unusual for rhinos, especially not in the situation that we saw earlier. You often find that the bull and the female, they might even injure each other, even little ones, especially when the bulls are there because they want to investigate the female. The little ones can be exposed to danger, and that's why these females become very, very protective. Even if they are aware of each other's presence in the area, as long as it's not direct interaction and attention in certain cases. But something caught the attention, so these guys are up. So I think from one large pachyderm on the water's edge to a slightly more aquatic pachyderm, let's head over to Simbavati. Where we've got a very, very active hippo. Right here in the Simbavati Game Reserve. He seems like he's slightly shy now. Now I heard he was out of the water just now, so let's see what he does. But it's been interesting in and around the area around the Simbavati. A lot of these hippos have suddenly started showing up from all around. With all the rain and the abundance of water and all the watering holes filled up, now these hippos have come from quite far. You can see the pink inner of the mouth there, extremely pink, like a bright, bright pink. The hippo looks quite dark. I'm not sure if it's a younger hippo or not, but what happens? Hippos are interesting creatures. When the fight for the water gets on, and water sources become scarce, and the pressure mounts for finding safe water, then you find that these guys become quite tense, and they have some quite tense interactions with others around watering holes trying to get in there. And then of course once they are done, and they start to move away with one area, once they're done with one area, and they start to move away as soon as the rains come, then you find that they have a lot of these transitional phases, and they show up in new holes, and in their exploratory walks they come across others, and those ones might sometimes be occupied, so then they kind of fight it out to set each other's out. But good to check in here at Simbavati Waterside. I think what we'll do is we're going to move along, and we're going to head back to Founders. Founders has been quite special this afternoon with that beautiful blue sky. And the beautiful rhinos. See this massive rhino bull here. Have a look now, he's covering last little bits of his nose and nostrils, loosening up some mud. When there's no wet mud like that, sometimes you can see those long moustachial hairs around the nose. Something you often notice. Very sensitive extensions of the nerve endings. But what a huge specimen indeed. What a beautiful animal. Reluctant to move away from the cool mud, but it looks like the cloud covers moved over and covered that patch, so maybe that gave him a little bit of energy. You can see he's just investigating the other wallows around, and it would be interesting to see what he does. He might move over towards where that cow and calf went, but let's see. Here we go. I think he might cover his face properly first. You can see that elongated head, flat, square lip. Oh, and no, he's decided to go back down. Maybe he was just looking for a much better spot. So his reluctance proved to just be a slow move to a more muddier spot. Deb Davis, you saying you can't know how that mud can feel comfortable. Well, Deb, I don't know if you've ever taken a mud bath, but if you are open to something like that, I would suggest that you do try it at one point. It is quite soothing, and it has a lot of benefits for the skin and for protection for these animals. But I think for them, the fact that it's also much cooler than the surrounding area and soft, it's not as hard as the soil filled with thorns, although there might be some thorns or whatever left behind by other animals. I think it's still quite comfortable relatively compared to the surrounding surface of the soil. And also, of course, it helps this animal cools down. And just have a look at him. Not much of a bother. And there comes another rhino back in. A younger one. I always find it interesting how the perspective messes. You see, he's picked up on it. And for that exact reason, that's why those ears are on swivels like that. Constantly moving back. Picking up very, very carefully on the minutest of sounds. It might be coming from the back. You can see that rhino is of course approaching very, very carefully, but I was just checking it out, and of course now we can see it's drawn the big bull's attention. And it might be unwanted. Just have a look at this powerhouse of an animal. What a massive animal. Jive Bunny, you saying it's a wonderful show and you enjoyed the crowned cranes thoroughly, and of course the rhinos here at Founders as well. I agree. I think it is quite a spectacular sight. So interesting, I can see from here it looks like this rhino that's just arrived looks like a female, and I don't see a calf with her. And I was wondering, it was quite a sudden change in behavior once it picked up on it, as we saw those two other rhinos approach it earlier, and they were almost begging to wallow or for some attention, and he didn't pay the slightest. So very likely those two were indeed two young males, and then this a female, so now he's interested. You can see he's turning on the charm. Dressed in mud, carefully observing, and from here starts the slow approach. And this is interesting behavior, rhino courting behavior. The bull can often follow a female, sometimes with a calf or without, for a number of days. Try and see if there's any interest from her side, and continually try and maneuver and keep them within his territory. And of course with rhinoceros, sometimes territories do overlap, especially around watering holes where they do tolerate each other as well, as we can see here. This female and that younger female, I mean, I don't think she'll approach this one with her calf, maybe out of curiosity. And have a look at that rhinoceros carefully utilizing whatever little shade that tree is providing currently. Willie, you saying that was quite a handsome rhino? Indeed it was, eh? I think the mud also makes him look extra handsome, quite sleek. It accentuates its muscles as it gets out. Especially it looked like there was some sort of a stretch attempt just before he left the mud there. Let's see, where did he go now? Oh, there we go. Aha! Using the rubbing rock. I think this is a first for me. I mean, this rock is a shining example of a rubbing post, but I've never actually seen it used, and now I am seeing it being used very effectively for the hard to reach places between the abdominal muscles on the rhino's belly. Wildlife Lady, you're saying thanks and that you have enjoyed live at the watering hole today, and it was fantastic. I agree. I think there was a lot happening, especially these rhinos have obviously played a huge role in that, and it was certainly an afternoon of the pachyderms with the antics of these rhinos and the elephant, the magnificent elephant, 1 ton there at Oldonyo. Have a look. So he's getting all that hard to reach places. So first in between the legs and the belly, and then the excess mud around the nose. Now interesting, even though they cover themselves so thickly with the mud, part of rubbing themselves off like this is not just to get rid of the excess mud, it's also to actually force it into some of the harder to reach patches, which might not necessarily have got mud while it was laying down. But as the mud dries, sometimes it becomes itchy as it flakes off, so it's always good to get rid of it or the excess beforehand, maybe just rather smooth it out and force it into those hard to reach creeks. So Jive Bunny, you're saying that mud spas can be extremely expensive and can cost humans a fortune. Yes, indeed it can. And the animals show us how valuable it can be. A very, very important aspect of animals' lives out here. These watering holes, even if it's not water directly, the mud that they provide for some animals are extremely important. And just have a look at all that glorious mud there. Those 2 rocks are completely caked in mud from all sides. Would have loved to know how much mud is on there. But looks like this animal is now getting ready to maybe do a major move away from this watering hole. And on that note, I would like to say thank you from all of us here at Wild Earth. We bid you a good afternoon, and I'll hope to check you all next time.